Cops talk to killer, mom as daughter's dead body hides in house, the Susan Smith case. Opening hook 000-130. It was crying on national television. Susan Smith, a mother in distress. Her children were missing. A carjacker had taken them. She begged the public for help. She described the suspect, a black man, middle-aged, dangerous. She appeared on every major news network. She gave interviews. She pleaded for her son's return. She looked devastated. She sounded desperate. She seemed genuine. America believed her. Police believed her. The media covered it extensively. Search teams mobilized. Thousands of volunteers looked for the children. Everyone wanted to find Michael and Alex, her two young sons, 3 years old and 14 months old. Innocent children, missing and in danger, or so everyone thought. What nobody knew was that Susan Smith was lying, completely lying, while she spoke to police, while she cried on television, while search teams looked everywhere. Her two sons were dead. At the bottom of John D. Long Lake, in her Mazda sedan, she had put them there. She had let the car roll into the water. She had drowned her own children. And then she had looked into cameras and lied about it. For 9 days, 9 days of deception, 9 days of false hope, 9 days of playing the victim while her children's bodies floated underwater. This is the story of how a mother deceived an entire nation, how police were fooled by a convincing liar, how the truth was eventually discovered, and what it reveals about deception, manipulation, and the justice system. Before I continue, let me ask you, have you ever been lied to by someone you trusted? Drop your answer in the comments, because Susan Smith's story is about trust and betrayal, and how appearances can be completely false. Michael Smith was 3 years old, a normal 3-year-old boy. He played, he laughed, he had his whole life ahead of him. Alexander Smith was 14 months old, a toddler, still learning to walk, still learning language, still discovering the world. Both boys were innocent. Both boys were loved by their extended family. Both boys deserved to grow up, to become adults, to have futures, to have dreams, to have lives. But Susan Smith was their mother, and Susan Smith had other plans. Susan Smith was 31 years old, born in South Carolina, raised in a troubled home. Her father had committed suicide when she was young. Her mother had remarried. Her stepfather had sexually abused her. These traumas shaped her. These experiences affected her, but they did not excuse what she would do. Susan Smith married David Smith. They had 2 children together, Michael first, then Alexander. The family seemed normal. They lived in Union, South Carolina, a small town. Quiet community, but Susan Smith was becoming increasingly unhappy. She wanted a different life. She wanted wealth. She wanted status. She wanted to be with a wealthy man who had recently moved to town, a man named Tom Findlay, a man with money, a man without children, a man who had made clear he did not want stepchildren. This became her obsession. This became her motivation. She began an affair with Tom Findlay. She told him she had no children. She lied about her situation. She tried to present herself as available, as free, as uncomplicated, but she had 2 children, 2 real children, 2 children who were obstacles to her fantasy, 2 children who stood between her and Tom Findlay. Now here's what happened next. Susan Smith appeared to be a normal person. She had a job. She worked at a local company. She interacted with coworkers. She seemed functional. She seemed stable. But beneath the surface, she was troubled. She was manipulative. She was capable of deception. She was capable of violence. Her history showed patterns of dangerous behavior. She had attempted suicide before. She had struggled with depression. She had made poor choices. She had lied to people close to her. She had affairs. She betrayed her husband. She betrayed her family. She betrayed everyone around her. But nobody suspected her of being capable of murder. Nobody suspected her of being capable of killing her own children. This is the danger of people like Susan Smith. They appear normal. They blend in. They seem trustworthy. But they're capable of terrible things. The police didn't suspect her initially. Why would they? She was the mother. Mothers protect their children. Mothers don't harm their children. Mothers certainly don't drown their children. So when Susan Smith reported her children missing, police believed her. When she described the carjacker, police believed her. When she gave emotional interviews, police believed her. The media believed her. The public believed her. Everyone believed her because they couldn't imagine a mother doing what she had done. They couldn't imagine the deception. They couldn't imagine the manipulation. They couldn't imagine the cold calculation involved in drowning our own children and then lying about it for 9 days. Susan Smith represented something terrifying, a person so willing to manipulate that she could convince an entire nation of her innocence, a person so cruel that she could murder her own children, a person so selfish that she would sacrifice her children for a man. Let me know what you think about this case in the comments. October 25, 1994. Union, South Carolina, a small town where everyone knows everyone, a quiet place, a safe place, or so people thought. Susan Smith drove her Mazda sedan. She had her 2 sons with her, Michael and Alexander, strapped into car seats. Innocent children, unaware of what was about to happen. She drove toward John D. Long Lake, a lake outside town, a place where she could be alone, a place where nobody would immediately see what she was doing. She arrived at the boat ramp area. She parked her car facing the water. She looked around. Nobody was there. The coast was clear. This was the moment. This was the point of no return. She got out of the car. She left the children inside, strapped in their seats, unable to escape, unable to help themselves, unable to understand what was happening. She put the car in neutral. She released the parking brake. The car began to roll, slowly at first, then faster. It rolled down the ramp. It entered the water. The front of the car went in first. Water rushed in through the windows and doors. The children would have been terrified. They would have cried. They would have struggled. But they couldn't escape. They were trapped. The car sank deeper. The water filled the interior. The children drowned. Within minutes it was over. Michael and Alexander Smith were dead. Their bodies remained in the submerged vehicle. Their mother had killed them. And then she had done something even more shocking. She had called 911. She had reported them missing. If stories like this matter to you, hit subscribe right now. Susan Smith sat in the police station. She was crying. She was telling her story. A black man carjacked me. He drove off with my children. I don't know where they are. Please find them. Please help me, she said. Her performance was perfect. Her tears seemed genuine. Her desperation seemed real. She described the carjacker in detail. He was black, middle-aged. He had a gun. He just took my car with my children inside. I couldn't stop him, she said. Police detectives listened. They wrote down her description. They believed her. They had no reason not to believe her. A mother wouldn't lie about her children missing. A mother wouldn't harm her own children. So they took her story at face value. They began investigating. They put out an alert. They looked for a black carjacker. They interviewed witnesses. They searched neighborhoods. Days passed. 9 days. 9 days of searching. 9 days of police following false leads. 9 days of the public being mobilized based on a lie. 9 days of news coverage. National news coverage. Major networks, cable news, newspapers. Everyone was talking about the missing children. Everyone was looking. Everyone wanted to help. But the children weren't missing. They were dead. Susan Smith continued her performance. She gave more interviews. She appeared on national television. Please, if you have my children, bring them back. I love them so much. I just want my boys home, she said. Her voice broke. Her tears flowed. She was an actress playing the role of a grieving mother, but she wasn't grieving. She was relieved. She was free. She was no longer bound to her children. She was available to Tom Findlay, the man she wanted, the man without children, the man she had been trying to impress. But police were beginning to have doubts, small inconsistencies in her story, details that didn't quite add up. The way she described the carjacker, the way she described the carjacking, the details seemed rehearsed, practiced. Not the spontaneous account of a traumatized woman. Detectives decided to push harder. They administered a polygraph test, a lie detector test. Susan Smith was nervous, but she passed it or appeared to pass it. The test was inconclusive. Detectives continued to press her. They asked her to repeat her story. They asked for more details. They looked for inconsistencies. Slowly, Susan Smith began to crack. Type truth if you think she should have confessed immediately. Pressure was mounting. Detectives confronted Susan Smith with the problems in her story. They told her that search teams hadn't found any evidence of a carjacker. They told her that witnesses didn't remember seeing a black man in the area. They told her that her description didn't match any known criminals. They told her that her story wasn't adding up. Susan Smith maintained her lie, but cracks were forming. Her resolve was weakening. The emotional toll of maintaining the deception was showing. She was tired. She was stressed. She was breaking down. Detectives used a technique called confrontation. They presented her with evidence that contradicted her account. They told her they knew she was lying. They told her they were going to figure out the truth. They told her it would be better if she told them herself. Susan Smith resisted. She continued her story. She insisted on her version of events. But inside, she was unraveling. The weight of the lie was crushing her. The knowledge of what she had done was destroying her mentally. She had murdered her 2 children. She had drowned them. She had let them suffocate and drown in her car. And then she had lied about it for 9 days. The guilt was overwhelming. The stress was unbearable. The detectives kept pushing. They asked her to repeat details. They asked her to describe the carjacker again. They asked her to explain inconsistencies. Each time she answered, they caught her in contradictions. Each time she spoke, the web of lies became more apparent. Finally, on November 3, 1994, 9 days after she drowned her children, Susan Smith broke. She confessed. She told police the truth. She told them she had driven to the lake. She told them she had let the car roll into the water. She told them her children were in the lake. She told them everything. She led police to John D. Long Lake. Divers were called. The lake was searched. The Mazda sedan was located. The car was raised from the water. The bodies of Michael and Alexander Smith were removed from the vehicle. They had been underwater for 9 days. The autopsy would confirm what Susan Smith had done. She had drowned her own children. She had murdered them. And she had lied about it to everyone: police, detectives, the public, the media, her husband, her family, everyone. Wait until you hear what happened next. Susan Smith was arrested. She was charged with 2 counts of murder. The evidence was overwhelming. Her confession was recorded. Her statement to police was documented. The bodies of her children had been found exactly where she said they would be. The autopsy confirmed drowning. The evidence was irrefutable. The trial began in 1995. It became one of the most high-profile criminal trials in American history. Cameras were allowed in the courtroom. Media coverage was extensive. The nation watched. The prosecution presented evidence. They presented her confession. They presented the autopsy results. They presented the timeline. They presented the motive. Susan Smith wanted to be with Tom Findlay. Tom Findlay didn't want children, so she removed her children. She murdered them. The defense argued for mercy. They cited her troubled childhood. They cited her depression. They cited her suicide attempts. They argued that she was mentally unstable. They asked for life in prison instead of the death penalty. The jury deliberated. They found her guilty of murder. They sentenced her to life in prison, not the death penalty, but life. She would spend the rest of her life in prison, 30 years to life. She would be eligible for parole in 2024. But the sentence was clear. Justice had been served. Susan Smith was convicted. She was imprisoned. She was removed from society. But the damage was done. 2 children were dead. Family was destroyed. A community was traumatized. A nation was shocked. The case revealed something important. It revealed how convincing a liar can be. It revealed how people can manipulate others. It revealed how even trained detectives can be fooled by a compelling narrative. It revealed how important it is to verify evidence, to check facts, to not accept stories at face value. The case also revealed something darker. It revealed that mothers can harm their children. That family bonds don't guarantee safety. That trust can be betrayed in the most horrifying ways. If you believe accountability matters, hit subscribe right now. The Susan Smith case captivated America. The trial was televised. Millions watched. Millions followed every detail. The case was discussed everywhere, in homes, in offices, in schools, on street corners. The media coverage was extensive. Every major network covered it. Every newspaper reported it. The public was fascinated. The public was horrified. The public was shocked. Comments filled the media. People wrote, "How could a mother do this? How could she murder her own children?" Others said, "She manipulated everyone. She lied to police. She lied to the media. She lied to the nation." One comment read, "This case shows why we need to be careful about false accusations. A false story about a black carjacker caused harm and distrust." The case became a teaching moment. Police departments studied it. They learned about deception. They learned about manipulation. They learned about the importance of critical questioning. The case became a cautionary tale. A story about how appearance can be deceiving. A story about how trust can be misplaced. A story about how people can lie convincingly. The case also had a darker impact. False reports about black carjackers increased after the Susan Smith case. People became suspicious of black men. Racial stereotypes were reinforced. The false narrative that Susan Smith created had real consequences. It harmed black communities. It increased suspicion and fear. It contributed to racial profiling. The case was shared and discussed for years. It remains one of the most infamous murder cases in American history. It remains a symbol of deception. It remains a reminder of how quickly truth can be distorted. Share this story if you think people should understand the dangers of false narratives. Susan Smith was convicted of 2 counts of murder on July 24, 1995. The jury deliberated for about 3 hours, 3 hours to decide the fate of a woman who had murdered her own children. The verdict was guilty. The sentence was life in prison with eligibility for parole, not the death penalty, but life, 30 years to life. She would be eligible for parole in 2024, but by that time, her children would have been adults. Michael would have been 32 years old. Alexander would have been 30 years old. They would have had their own lives, their own families, their own futures. But Susan Smith took that away. The legal system worked. The evidence was strong. The trial was fair. The verdict was just. But there were questions raised by the case. Questions about how she was able to deceive so many people for so long. Questions about police procedures. Questions about how false narratives can spread. Questions about the impact of false accusations on innocent communities. Civil rights advocates noted that Susan Smith's false description of a black carjacker had consequences. It reinforced stereotypes. It increased suspicion of black men. It contributed to racial profiling. This aspect of the case was important. It showed that false accusations have real victims, not just the person falsely accused, but entire communities. Susan Smith remained in prison. She did not receive preferential treatment. She did not receive early release. She served her sentence. She was imprisoned for what she had done. The case became a landmark case in criminal justice. It was studied in law schools. It was discussed in police academies. It was analyzed by criminologists. It was examined by psychologists. The case revealed important lessons about deception, about manipulation, about the vulnerability of even trained investigators to convincing lies. The case also revealed something about maternal filicide, about how mothers can harm their children, about how the assumption that mothers are inherently protective can be wrong. The case challenged assumptions. It forced people to recognize that danger can come from unexpected places, that family members can be threats, that trust can be misplaced. The legal consequences for Susan Smith were severe, but the broader consequences of her lie were even more significant. The false narrative she created had ripple effects. It harmed communities. It created suspicion. It reinforced stereotypes. It had consequences that extended far beyond her prison sentence. Michael Smith never grew up. He never went to school. He never learned to read. He never made friends. He never played sports. He never fell in love. He never got married. He never had children. He never accomplished his dreams. He never became an adult. He was 3 years old when he died, 3 years old. His entire life ahead of him, his entire future stolen. Alexander Smith never took his first steps without help. He never spoke more than a few words. He never learned language. He never went to kindergarten. He never made memories. He never grew. He never developed. He was 14 months old when he died, 14 months old. His entire existence ahead of him, his entire potential erased. These children cannot speak. They cannot testify. They cannot tell their story, but their deaths speak volumes. Their murders expose a terrible truth. A mother killed them. A mother drowned them. A mother lied about it. Mother prioritized a man over her children's lives. A mother chose her own selfish desires over the safety of her own children. The children were victims, the ultimate victims. They had no voice. They had no choice. They had no escape. They were completely dependent on their mother, and their mother betrayed that trust in the most horrifying way. Their deaths change how we think about maternal filicide. Their deaths change how police investigate missing children cases. Their deaths changed how we understand deception. Their deaths had meaning, even though they were taken too soon, even though they were murdered by the person who should have protected them. Their deaths mattered. Their deaths were remembered. Their deaths served as a warning about the depths of human depravity, a warning about the danger of unchecked selfishness, a warning about the fragility of life. Michael and Alexander Smith deserved better. They deserve to live. They deserved their mother's love and protection. They deserved their futures, but they didn't get any of that. They got a mother's selfishness, a mother's manipulation, a mother's murder. That is their legacy. That is their story. That is what we remember when we speak about the Susan Smith case. The Susan Smith case revealed critical flaws in how police investigate missing children cases. Confirmation bias led investigators to believe her initial story without sufficient verification. False accusations against innocent communities create real harm and increase racial profiling. Media sensationalism amplifies false narratives and spreads misinformation. The case became a turning point in understanding maternal filicide and deception. Mothers account for approximately 8% of all child murders in America. Most murders of children are committed by caregivers, not strangers. The public perception that danger comes from outside the family is incorrect. Danger often comes from within, from trusted family members, from caregivers, from mothers. This systemic blindness allowed Susan Smith's lie to persist for 9 days. So let me ask you, how could a mother murder her own children? How could she lie about it to police and the nation? How could she maintain her deception for 9 days while her children's bodies were underwater? Because Susan Smith did all of that, and she almost got away with it. Comment below. Do you think the justice system handled this case fairly? Do you think her sentence was appropriate? Do Do you think society should have seen the warning signs? If you believe true crime stories matter, hit that subscribe button. We're going to keep exposing these cases. We're going to keep examining how deception works. We're going to keep demanding accountability. We're going to keep remembering the victims. Michael and Alexander Smith deserved better. They deserve to be remembered. They deserve justice. And they deserve a society that protects children. This isn't just about Susan Smith. It's about understanding how danger can come from unexpected places. It's about recognizing that family bonds don't guarantee safety. It's about acknowledging that anyone is capable of terrible things. Subscribe. See you in the next one.